This is produced as part of the ongoing work on the website, thewaythetruthandthelife.net. Hello, I'm Donald Johnson, and this is the introduction to the foundation section of my website. To me, the foundation of physical reality is matter, space, and motion. That these are not created or not destroyed. That creation is a process of forming something or destroying the form of something, creating something new. But matter, space, and motion are eternal. I have a great deal of respect for what the Christian apostle Paul said on Mars Hill when he saw the Greeks put a monument to the unknown God. They didn't want to miss anybody. And Paul said, "That is my God, the unknown God. In him I live and move and have my being." Well, that operationally defines what God is for me. In him I live and move and have my being. To me, God is not some magic extraterrestrial or otherworld being sitting on a cloud somewhere, throwing rocks on people or bringing blessings to them. To me, physical reality is God's body, and the laws of sociology and psychology, and physiology, cytology, chemistry, physics, cosmology, these are all God's laws. In him we live and move and have our being. And we are part of this existence. A transient part, like a cell in our body. We are part of this body. And the intelligent part of it. The description of a thing is not the thing. I enjoy the literature that I've read, like the Tao Te Ching and some of the Buddhist literature, which has freed people to enjoy living in this reality. Others have been taught to enslave people, like with caste systems. And I respect very much the things that have freed us, but in the process, the Jewish and others introduced memorization to carry on the improved culture, but by systematic programming that took away individual freedoms to grow and gave them no freedom as they protected the Hebrew culture amongst those doing human sacrifice and involved in rape, pillage, and plunder, as still going on in the world today in some places. But it didn't give them freedom. It did help them to maintain their culture even in the dispersion. These things were picked up by Muhammad and used as an expansionist theocracy, and the indoctrination contains in it to do unto others as they've done unto you, and enemies of my God are your enemies, and you can kill them and take their women and their money, so forth. Well, that's part of the evil of memorization. Not many minds are free today. The other problem is the corruption of aristocracy by women not wanting to bother with their children. And when they have the affluence to pay somebody, they hire servants, wet nurses and babysitters to take care of their children. So there's a natural breaking of the maternal bond and a serious harm done to the developmental process. They aren't even healthy mammals, the children of this aristocracy raised like this. Many are sociopaths and psychopaths without the ability to care for others like self. But that's created many problems also of poor government, because these children of the affluent who are deprived of a healthy mammalian bond in early childhood grow up to inherit money and wealth in politics and religion. And this happened in Europe leading to the French Revolution. There was so much inhumanity amongst the upper classes and the priests. But in all this harsh background of child sacrifice and widespread tribal conflict and murder and robbery, Abraham was the archetype used to improve human culture, the raising of children, not to sacrifice them. He was the example of not sacrificing Isaac, and set that culture in the Middle East on a path of raising children without child sacrifice. When they came out of Egypt, they had to deal with the problem of going into an environment where they were sacrificing children to Moloch. And in fact, to make a safe place for their higher level culture amongst those doing rape, pillage, and plunder and child sacrifice, they exterminated many of them just to make a safe place to live. They established law and order. Law and order was established wherever the powers of government ranged over a large area. Within their boundaries, there was law and order. Well, in Europe, the corruption of the priests and the powerful class led to rebellion, and the Jewish, who had to memorize the Torah, only had the choice to rebel or comply. If they rebelled, they were rejected by their family. They weren't exterminated. The Muslims make their children memorize the Quran. A Muslim in Islamic society under Sharia law doesn't have the freedom to rebel. To rebel is to be murdered. So there's little rebellion in areas of Sharia law. But in Europe, the Jews had the freedom to rebel. They had been brought up by indoctrination. They didn't have a broad background of experience to have a clear mind. When you're indoctrinated, you, as a child, you don't have the ability, you've been deprived of natural growth. All you can do is rebel or comply against the indoctrination is internal, and it leaves internal conflict. So I state many things in a religious context because I enjoy very much home meetings, and I found much wisdom in the Bible. As Bruno Bettelheim said, even though he wasn't a religious man, in his study, he was a survivor of the Nazi Holocaust, and he studied the Jews in Israel. He wrote books on about the kibbutzim and about child development, and he wrote about folk tales. And what he discovered is many of the stories in the Bible are in many cultures. And what he discovered was that in pre-written times, the information was carried on by storytellers. The wisdom of the elders was carried on by storytellers. And that wisdom has like stories about jealousy and the harmfulness of it, the jealous brothers and so forth, are in many cultures. And the nonsense and foolishness of folk tales tended to get dropped. But when the Jews came out of Egypt, there was writing available to them then. And they wrote down these stories that had gone on for thousands of years. And it just carried the insight from the background and the cultural foundation. And the hope here is to reveal a way of life that healthy people could interact, home meetings and discussion, and mothers and fathers caring for their children in single-family homes and having community. Oh, it's broken down since I was a boy, and it's so grievous to me. I hope you can see that the value of Christianity and home meetings, and that Jesus saying, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I like to operationally define things. That is, how do you know what you have? Oxygen is a gas that if you take a glowing splint and put in, it'll burst into flames. So you've operationally defined oxygen, you know, when you have it. To me, the operational definition of heaven is what can happen for good in God's body. And for me, the operational definition of Jesus, the Christ, the Savior, is the firstborn that understood that he was part of God and God was in him, and that he had a personal relationship. He had grown in love to that point. When they ask about soul to me is a culture. And to be born again is to be born in this culture of Christ, that's building for heaven, the best it can be in God. And salvation is to be able to contribute to this. That something of our lives would go on as long as intelligence exists in God's body, because we carried that outlook and passed it on to the next generation. To me, our outlook is our spirit. Our soul is our culture. Our outlook is our spirit. Heaven is the best it can be in God's body. And salvation is to participate in those things that go on as long as intelligent life exists in God's body. I'm so thankful for these things and what Jesus said when he asked, what must I do to be saved? He said, love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and soul and mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. If you do these things, you will not violate God's laws. Those are the laws of nature. Nature is not outside of God. It's God's physical body. And we are intelligence in God's physical body. Let's start acting like it. Not as the Quran says, do unto them, or as the Old Testament says, there's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. No, forgive, because half the time what we think is an offense is somebody just didn't understand, and we project. Things like this, the way that human culture is going without caring for children and without having healthy homes, and the need for, we know how to make a culture to grow bacteria. Let's make a culture that knows how to grow healthy children who can achieve individual sovereignty and enlightenment with all the knowledge that we have of this reality in which we live and move and have our being. Thank you.